Why do we hate?
We hate because we're taught to hate. We hate because we're ignorant. We're the product of ignorant people who have been taught an ignorant thing, which is that there are 4 or 5 different races. There are not 4 or 5 different races. There's only one race on the face of the earth, and we're all members of that race, the human race.
Hate is something that is so deeply embedded in our nation's history. As a Black woman, racism defined to me is to be an outcast of my own race, the human race. I didn't get to choose the color of my skin, but I've decided, like Ida B. Wells, to use this as a platform to evoke change. Ida B. Wells began this fight 120 years ago, and we are still asking the same question: why do we hate?
By the end of her life, Ida B. Wells was known as the Princess of the Press. This accomplishment was extremely rare for a Black woman born a slave. Luckily, her parents, James and Lizzie Wells, provided her with a strong foundation on the notion of equality. She used her struggle as a previously enslaved Black woman and her passion for civil rights to fulfill her social responsibility. It was not until Wells personally experienced such hatred that she felt an obligation to pave the way for change. After being told to move to the colored section of a train car, she fought her way to the Supreme Court, where her case was, unsurprisingly, dismissed. She viewed this as a temporary setback and did not let this outcome deter her from pursuing her passion for activism. Since her early years, Wells has been an activist for those who are unable to speak for themselves, such as women, journalists, and people of color.
It was not until the People's Grocery lynching of 1889 that she felt compelled to pursue her career as a journalist. She told the story of 3 Black men who were brutally beaten and lynched without reason. This was a horrific act performed by hateful, racist white men. Because of their privilege, these atrocities were not being reported accurately. Wells took it upon herself to reveal the dark and heinous crimes committed against people of color in our nation. If it had not been for Ida B. Wells risking her reputation as a journalist, we would not know the ugly truths that were previously being covered up.
Ida B. Wells had a very strong background in education. Through attending Shaw University, she learned how to exercise her rights as an American, despite the oppression that came with being a woman of color. This allowed her to break through the walls that were systematically placed to keep people of color socially enslaved. Having this privilege of education allowed her to grow as an activist and as a writer. Her love for education is what pushed her to become a teacher in segregated schools, but it was her passion for activism that advanced her career as a journalist. After years of fighting for civil rights and leading anti-lynching campaigns, she eventually became the owner of a Memphis newspaper, Free Speech and Headlight, a very well-suited title for Wells. She once stated, "I felt that one had better die fighting against injustice than to die like a dog or a rat in a trap." And from the start to the end of her career, she truly lived by these words.
Without her education, Wells would not have been as well informed on the social justice issues discussed. It is important for each generation of people to have equal access to education on topics that affect us both individually and as a whole. With constant technological advancements, it has become easier for the majority of Americans to educate themselves on important issues.
Ida B. Wells was a groundbreaking journalist and activist, a co-founder of the NAACP. It's difficult to choose which occupation defines her legacy best. She once wrote, "The very frequent inquiry made after my lectures by interested friends is, what can I do to help the cause? The answer always is, tell the world the facts." Wells became known as a dangerous radical due to her refusal to accept any compromise on racial inequality. This later made her a model for later civil rights activists as well as a powerful witness to the troubled racial politics of her era.
Ida B. Wells fought her entire life to expose the hidden truths of racism in our country. She had her own struggles as a woman of color, but she used her education and her passion for journalism to get the truth to the people. Sadly, this battle is not over. To this day, we follow in the footsteps of Wells by using technology to record and expose the overwhelming occurrences of police brutality in this country. Movements like Black Lives Matter are built on the backs of those who fought against social injustices before us. Wells was able to pave the way for future generations of educators, activists, and journalists by exposing the nation to its ugly truths. She once stated, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of the truth upon them." As future journalists, it is our job to do the same.